We're going to start. Be'ezras Hashem. Today's daf is Masechta Avodah Zarah, daf Nun Gimel 53. Let us start from the Mishnah. The Mishnah on daf Nun Beis Amud Beis. Here we go. Okay. So the Mishnah begins. Nachri mevatel Avodah Zarah shaloi v'shal chavera. A Nachri can destroy an Avodah Zarah or nullify his own Avodah Zarah, and even if it's his friend's Avodah Zarah, even if his friends didn't give him permission, he can just nullify that whole Avodah Zarah, and it loses its, power of Avodah Zarah, so to speak, and a Jew can benefit from it. A Jewish Avodah Zarah, if a Yid made an Avodah Zarah, so one thing you have to know, if a Jew made an Avodah Zarah, you can never be Mavatal it. It will always remain Asr Bana. The only way to do anything with it is just bury it in the ground. But the Mishnah teaches you, Yisrael ein mevatel avodah zarah shel nachri. A Jew cannot be mevatel an avodah zarah belonging to a nachri. He can't nullify. He can't go over to a nachri and say, "Oh, your idol is worthless." Now, the Mishnah says, "Hamavatel avodah zarah." If the goy was mevatel his avodah zarah, he nullified his avodah zarah. Mevatel misham sheha. Then the shovel or the other instruments that are used in the service of the Avodah Zarah also lose their tumas Avodah Zarah. But bitul misham shah, but if he only nullified the kalim, the shovel, the other service, the fork, whatever it is that they use for their Avodah Zarah, the misham shah mutarim, then the items that are used to serve the Avodah Zarah mutar, but the Avodah Zarah remains asr. Says the Gemara. Masnile Rabbi Rab Shimon ber Rebbe. Rebbe taught his own son, Rab Shimon, and he taught him the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Nachri mevatel avodah zarah shaloi v'shal chavera." Nachri to nullify his own avodah zarah and the ones belonging to his friend. Amalei Rebbe. So his son said, "Dad or master, my teacher, Shanisa lanu biyalduscha. You taught us when we were younger. Nachri mevatel avodah zarah shaloi v'shal Yisrael. A Nachri could nullify his Avodah Zarah, and not of his friends, but even a Jewish Avodah Zarah. Remember I said a Jewish Avodah Zarah, if a Yid made an Avodah Zarah, it can't be nullified. Rebbe said it could be nullified. So the Gemara right away asks, the Yisrael mikam avatl, if a Jew made an Avodah Zarah, can anybody nullify it? The Torah tells you that if a Jew makes an Avodah Zarah, the only way to get rid of it is hide it, bury it in the ground. It's not like you can nullify it. Amar Rav Hillel Bereid Rav Valis Lo Nitzracha Sheyesh Lo By Shutafes. That means that it was really the goys and the Jews Avodah Zarah. They both made an Avodah Zarah in partnership. And in the beginning, Rebbe held that since the goy is mavatal his share in the partnership, so automatically the Jewish part in that Avodah Zarah also becomes nullified. And when he got older, he said, no. The goy can mevatel his part, but he cannot be mevatel the part that belongs to the Jew. So the Gemara asks like this: when Rebbe was young, what did he hold? That the goy could be mevatel his part and the Yid's part, and when he got older, he changed his mind. What's going on? When Rebbe was younger, he felt Yisrael adaita the nachri pach. When a Jew goes into partnership with a goy to make an avodah zarah, the Jew has no feelings to this avodah zarah. He's doing it just to be good with the goy. So really, it's the goy's avodah zarah, and therefore, even the nachri mevatel the nafshi. Since this goy, his partner, was mevatel his part in the avodah zarah, the Yisrael nami mevatla, the Jew also's part also becomes nullified. But when Rebbe got older, Yisrael daited the nafshi polach. He felt that the Jew is bowing under his own. He's doing it by himself, and he's not really dependent on the goy. It's his part in the avodah zarah that he created with the goy, and therefore he mevatel nachri. If the nachri was mevatel his share, the nafshei he's only mevatel the nachri share. Yisrael loy batal, but the part belonging to the Jew doesn't become nullified. Ikid master law sefer. Some learn Rav Hillel Balwalis, the Bereid Rav Valis, statement was on the seif of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Yisrael einim mevatel avodah zarah shel nachri. Yisrael cannot be mevatel a goy's avodah zarah. Says the Mar Pshita, it's not his avodah zarah. How could a yid mevatel an avodah zarah belonging to a nachri? Amar Rab Hillel b'rei Durab. We go to Dvalas. We go to Amid Aleph. It's talking about there's a partnership here. The Kamash Malan, it's not the point. The point is Yisrael who delay mevatel the Nachri. If they both own a avodah zarah together, then the Jew cannot be mevatel that partnership. The mevatel the avodah zarah. Aval Nachri the nafshe mevatel. The Nachri could mevatel his part in the partnership. Of as we said before, he can't be mevatel the yid's part, but he can mevatel his own part, and that's what the chiddush of Rav Hillel Balvalis. And here, and some have the version of Hillel B'rei Ravalis saying his chiddush on a brisa. Mishnah's the brisa says Rab Shimon ben Nasi says Avodah Zarah shel Yisrael ein lo b'tei lamas. Avodah Zarah that was created by a Jew can never be nullified forever. Now it adds the word forever. My olamis. What do you mean forever? It's he's teaching you the novelty is that Reb Shimon Menashe is teaching that even if the goy has a partnership in this avodah zarah that was created by a yid, so it's 50 belonging to a goy, 50% belonging to a yid, even if the goy was mevatel his part, the yid's part still remains asar. The Kamash Malam, the Yisrael adaited the nafshei polach. When a yid goes into partnership with a goy, it's not that he's subservient to the goy and that's it. No, he's creating an avodah zarah with the intention to serve it on his own volition. So therefore, even if the goy was mevatel his part in the partnership, the yid's part doesn't become batal. New Mishnah. In mevatling avodah zarah, if a guy says, "Oh, I hate this avodah zarah, it doesn't work anyway," that probably is mevatel the avodah zarah. But we need him to do something to show that he really means it. So the Mishnah says, "Kate said mevatel." So what should he do extra? So he doesn't have to smash the avodah zarah into pieces. He cut the rosh asna. He can cut off the tip of the ear, rosh chaytma, the tip of the nose of the or rosh etzba, or the tip of the finger. He can do a little minor cut on the avodah zarah, and it's already bata. Not only that, pechasa, if he smashes it in the face, afal pish like history, even though nothing came off, it didn't lose any piece. It's just indented inside. Bitla, the avodah zarah becomes nullified. Now, what happens if a goy gets angry at his avodah zarah and rak b'fanai, he spits in front of it, hishtim b'fanai, he urinates, graro pulls the avodah zarah through the mud, zarak b'ay, he throws manure at the avodah zarah, harei zeni b'tela. It doesn't become nullified because maybe a momentary anger that he got at his avodah zarah, but really he's going to come back to it. Then the Mishnah says, mechara imashkara. Let's say the goy sold it to a goy, or he sold it, or he borrowed money against it from a guy. So he's using it as a collateral, or he sold it to another guy. So the fact that he's selling it is an indication he doesn't consider it valuable anymore. So Rabbi says that it's nullified. But Chacham says loy bitel, it's not nullified because he knows that the person that he's selling to is going to serve the avodah zarah because he's a guy. Says the Gemara, we learned that you smash the avodah zarah in the face, it becomes batal. Says the Gemara, ki like chisra b'may bitla. If it didn't lose anything, if it didn't lose a piece of the avodah zarah, so how does it become nullified? As we explained, you smashed it in the face of the avodah, so it loses its shape, its face. So therefore, avodah zarah is aser. I guess if you smash it in its leg, and it wouldn't become batal. It has to be in the face. How do you know that if a guy does this once to his avodah zarah, it doesn't become aser? There's a pasuk that says, when they're going to be hungry and they're going to get angry at their avodah zarah because they're starving, because it's not raining, then they're going to turn to God. I think it's talking about the 10 tribes. And then afterwards, when it's going to start to rain and the food going to come back, they're going to return back to look at the ground again for their Avodah Zarah. They're not going to, because once everything goes back to normal, they're going to come back to their Avodah Zarah. So first they curse their Avodah Zarah, and then they turn to God, and then when everything comes back good, they go back to their Avodah Zarah. So that's what we learned. If they do it one time, it's just an anger. Even though they curse their God and look upwards, then eventually they turn back and serve the Avodah Zarah. Obviously, if the goy constantly spits into his Avodah Zarah, then it's usher, then it's batal. Here we're talking about he did a one-time thing, so it doesn't become batal. Machra or Mishkana Rebbe Bitel. If he sold it to a goy, Rebbe says he was mavatal it. Zeiri Amar Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar Rav. There's a machlekes between Zeiri and Rabbi Yirmiyah, right? Or machlekes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rav. In understanding the machlekes between Rebbe, who says it's batal, and Chachamim, who say it's not nullified. Chadama once said machlekes b'tzaref goy, that if you sell it to a junkman, a person who deals with metal scraps of a goy. So Rebbe says if you do it to selling it to a metal scrapper, so he probably he showed that he doesn't care about his avodah zarah because the scrapper is going to break it, is going to melt it down. So therefore, it's bittul. But and Reb Chamim hold that's not batal because maybe the guy is going to say, I'm not going to melt it down. I'm going to use it for myself, for my own avodah zarah. Aval b'tzaref Yisrael, but if you sold it to a scrap metal that's a person who's a Jew, divrei hakol bittul. Everybody, Chachamim would agree to Rebbe that once a goy sells it to a scrap metal Jewish person, so he knows the Jew is going to melt it down and not use it as an avodah zarah. So it becomes nullified as an avodah zarah. But one said that mitzaref Yisrael machlokes, that even having an argument when you sell it to a scrap metal of a Jew, where Rebbe says it's batal, and Chachamim says that even if you sold it to a Jew, and the goy knows that the Jew scrap metal person is not going to serve this avodah zarah, he probably is going to melt it down, but the Chachamim held that perhaps he's going to hold on to it as is and sell it to another guy who's going to use it. So he's holding on to it. And that's what the guy who originally sold it had intention. So he was never mavatal it because another guy is going to use it as an avodah zarah. Iboyaluhu. So according to this part, the second chad, right, that they're only arguing by tzaref Yisrael. Iboyaluhu b'tzaref Yisrael machlokes. The machlokes is only if you sell it to a scrap metal Jewish person. Would he hold that if he sold it to a goy, everybody holds it doesn't become batal because the goy is never going to melt it down. Even the Chacham, even the Rebbe will hold that that it's not nullified because he knows when he sells it to another guy that guy is going to use it as his own deity. Maybe they're arguing by both cases, whether the Yid sells it to a guy, whether the guy is selling it to a Yid, of course, and also even if he's selling it to a guy, is machlekes. Rebbe holds batal, and the Chachamim hold loy batal. Tashma, come in here. The Amar Rebbe said, he commented, Nirin devarai, everybody likes what I say, kishemachar lechabala. When you sell it, and you know the guy is going to destroy it, that it's batal. V'divrei chavarai, and everybody likes chachamim, shemachra la'ovda, that if you sell it to somebody who's going to use it as a deity, of course it's not batal. Ma'ila chabala, ma'ila ovda. What did Rebbe mean by that? That means you sold it to somebody who's going to destroy it, and Rebbe holds, and the Chachamim holds loy bittul. I mean, you're trying to tell me that there's a machlokes in all situations. Well, and la'ovda means you sell it to somebody who's going to serve it, use the idol la'ovda mamish. He's really going to use it. So mein tama demanda bittul. Why would somebody hold that it's batal if you're selling it to somebody who's going to use it as an avodah zarah? And if you're selling it to somebody who's going to destroy it for sure, so then what's the reason why it's not batal according to an opinion? What kind of machlokes? Elalav, it must be lechabala lemisha asa lechabla. Chabala means it's somebody who's eventually you sell it to a Yid, that he could potentially destroy it. Umani tzaref Yisrael. La'oivda, to a scrap metal Jewish person in that business. La'oivda, if the guy sells it to somebody who serves Avodah Zarah, it means Lamisha also la'oivda. Who he sells it to a Mani tzaref goy, he sells it to a scrap metal goy who could potentially use it for himself. Ushmami no, from the fact that Rebbe, divided it up and said that we're arguing by both. It's whether you sell it to a goy, tzaref goy, or whether you sell it to a tzaref Yisrael. There's a machlekes between Rebbe and the Chachamim. Again, when you sell it to anybody, is it bottle? That's what Rebbe holds, and the Chachamim hold whether if you sell it to a goy. So maybe it's not bottle because he'll use it for himself. And even if you sell it to a tzaref Yisrael, perhaps he's not going to melt it down and right away break it apart. He's going to say, hey, before I do that, I'm going to sell it to another guy. So that's why the Chachamim hold loy bottle. So we see that they're arguing in both scenarios. Says the Gemara, loy, you don't really have such a proof. Because hachikamim, perhaps Rebbe meant to say like this, Amar Rebbe, nirin devarai lechaverai k'shemachal lechabola. Chachamim would agree to me that it's bottle if you sold it to a Kabbalah. If you sold it to somebody who could potentially break it down. Umani tzaref Yisrael. Sha'af chavrei le'nechaku el k'shemachal oivda. The Chachamim only argue when you sell it to a goy. Aval Kabbalah, if you sell it to a Yid, who probably is in the scrap metal business, he's going to break it down. Moidily, they would agree to me that it becomes bottle. So it's not clear if they would argue, even if you sell it to a tzaref Yisrael, even if you sell it to a scrap metal Jewish person, perhaps it's not clear. Maybe the Chachamim would agree that it's bottle. The Gemara asks the question: Guy buys scrap silver from a goy, and he buys let's say a bag of scrap silver. And then he finds in Avodah Zarah. Let's say he bought, empty soda cans, and inside the bag he found an Avodah Zarah. If he didn't pay for those cans, then all he has to do is return the Avodah Zarah to the guy. But if he already paid for it, so then it becomes, what does it become? Since he made a mashicha on that bag full of cans, and inside those bag was an Avodah Zarah, so now it becomes sort of like the Jewish Avodah Zarah. Yoylech Yam HaMelech, you have to throw the Avodah Zarah into Yam HaMelech. Now, the goy is sold it to a Jew, and nevertheless, we see that it doesn't become bottle. You sell it when you sell it to a Jew. Even there's a machlokes, and Chachamim will hold it's loy bottle. Hamani, who is the author of that price? Rabbanan. It's Rabbanan that it didn't become bottle, and that's why Yoylech the Yam HaMelech. Eliyama b'tzarev goy machlokes that they're only arguing by tzaref goy. Abu b'tzarev Yisrael, but you sell it to a Jewish scrap metal, divrei hakol bittul, it becomes nullified. Hamani, who's the author of this price? Why would I have to, if I buy the cans off a guy and inside I find his Avodah Zarah, even if I paid for all these cans, the fact that he sold it to me should be enough that he doesn't care about his Avodah Zarah. So it should automatically become bottle. So why do I have to throw it to the salt sea? Answers the Gemara, Shani Hasam, that daite to Kroy Sabin, I daite Avodah Zarah Leizamin. He didn't know that he's selling me the Avodah Zarah. He thought he's only selling me scrap metal silver or soda cans. But he didn't know that he's selling this, so therefore he didn't know that he's selling the Avodah Zarah. That's why the Avodah Zarah does not become bottle. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, if a goy, according to the Chachamim, if he sold the Avodah Zarah or borrowed money against it, it doesn't become bottle. Or let's say a guy had an Avodah Zarah and a wall fell on it. A guy had an Avodah Zarah and a wall fell on it. It doesn't become bottle. Aisha gadvu a listin, or he was mugged and someone stole his Avodah Zarah. Let's say they vacated an apartment and moved away to another country, and they left their Avodah Zarah there. We go to Amid Beis. If you think they could come back, it doesn't become bottle. If they could potentially, come back and say, "Hey, I left my Avodah Zarah in the apartment," then all these things doesn't make the Avodah Zarah a mutter for a Jew to take it. utzricha. We need all three cases. The itana lava left will just say that if he borrowed money against the avodah zarah, so midlay zabna, because he didn't sell it loy bitla, he wasn't nullified. He was only using it to as collateral to borrow money. Avil nafla lema poilets, but if a wall falls onto the avodah zarah, so I might think midlay kamfanile, since he doesn't remove all the stones to get to the avodah zarah. Amos batuli bitla. Maybe he was mavatal the avodah zarah. Tzricha. That's why it tells you in that case he's not mavatal the avodah zarah. If we just say that if a wall fell on it, the guy is not mavatal. It's right there. Anytime I could always take it. Call Amos the bein law, shakil the law. Anytime I want it, I'll be able to take it. Alvo ganvu list them if he was mugged and someone stole his avodah zarah. So I might think, since he maybe filed a police report, is not searching for it, maybe he was mavatal it. Suricha. That's why we need that case. Itana going to list them if we just say that Goyim took it, Mishum Desava, because he holds if Goyim take it, he's not mavatal it because he thinks to himself like this: Igoy shakel, if the mugger was a goy, miflach palachla, so then he's going to use it to for his own avodah zarah. And Yisrael shakala, but if the mugger was a yid, so the guy thinks I did the marry a car, and since he knows my avodah zarah is very expensive, he's going to sell it to another guy who palachla, and that guy will serve it. So the guy that was the victim of this mugging was never mvatal the avodah zarah, because even if the yid was the one that was the mugger, the guy thinks to himself, well, the yid's going to take this avodah zarah. He's not going to serve it, but he's going to sell it to somebody else because it's a very expensive avodah zarah. Aval, but if the bailam left it and went to Medina Siyam, went to another country, they vacated an apartment, they left their avodah zarah. Since they did not take the avodah zarah, I would think they nullified the avodah zarah. Sricha, that's why you need all three cases. That in all cases, even if they vacated the avodah zarah, and since they could potentially come back and get it, it's a not bottle. Says the Gemara, if the guy who vacated an apartment can come back and retrieve his avodah zarah, it's not bottle. Just like they did by Yeshua. Like the Goyim, the Jews fought in the days of Yeshua, and they got rid of the Goyim. The Goyim came back and took their avodah zarah. Therefore, it's Eina B'Tela. Says the Gemara, did the Goyim come back after the wars of Yeshua? We won the wars. The Goyim, the Amoraim left, and they abandoned, went to other places. They never came back to retrieve their avodah zarah. Hachi comment. This is what we meant to say. Im asidin lachzar, if they could come back, harehu k'mechames Yeshua ve'ein la b'tela. It has a din like the avodah zarah that was found after Yeshua took over the land, and therefore it's not nullified. Now, one could ask that since the Goyim abandoned their avodah zarah during the times of Yeshua, and they weren't coming back, it should be mutter. The answer is they would have liked to have come back, but they didn't have the opportunity to come back. So that's why it wasn't butter. So the Gemara says, why do we talk about the war of Yeshua where the Goyim never came back, but the avodah zarahs that they left over are asar? It's teaching you another teaching to understand another halacha you could learn in Hilchas avodah zarah. Like Yehuda Marav says, Yisrael shezokaf leveinu l'shtachasva. A Jew sets up a stone. Imagine a Jew setting up a stone, and he wants to bow to the stone, but he didn't bow yet, so it's not aser. And a goy came with the Jew's permission and bowed to the stone. Asara, the stone is aser. The Jew never gave him permission to bow. The stone becomes aser. Now, since the Jew set up the stone with the intention to bow to it, so the Jew wants it to be bowed to. Therefore, if the guy did it on his own, so then the stone becomes asar. Menolam the asar. How do you know something like that can become asar? Why don't you say a person can asar something that doesn't belong to him, and this stone belongs to the yid. So how could the guy asar it? Look what happened when the Jews took over Eretz Yisrael. The Torah said, after you drive out the Goyim, the Canaanim, what does the Torah says? V'ashereihem, they are Avodah Zarah trees, tisruful meish, you should burn them in fire. Now, why are there Avodah Zarah trees Aser? Michte, let us see. Yerusha hi lehem me'avaseyim. Really, Eretz Yisrael belonged to Avram Avinu. So how did the Goyim how were they able to make Avodah Zarah trees? Since Avram Avinu owned Eretz Yisrael, so how did the Goyim, the Canaanim, make Avodah Zarah trees? It's not theirs. Maybe the Torahs tell you that we're talking about the Avodah Zarah trees that preceded God giving the land to Avram Avinu. Those are Asa. So then, then the Jews, why do they have to burn it? They should get another guy and say, all the Asherah trees, and force it and say it's not Avodah Zarah. You could force a guy to nullify his Avodah Zarah. The question is now, why does the Chumash say that Avodah Zarah trees that you find after you drive out the Goyim, burn them in fire? Why do I have to burn them in fire? Get a guy and to say that it's not an Avodah Zarah tree anymore. Answers the Gemara, a very interesting answer. It's a Yid's. The Goyim made the Avodah Zarah tree, but it's the Jews' Avodah Zarah. Why? Because since the Jews worship the golden calf, so the Jews showed that they love Avodah Zarah. When the Goyim made that Avodah Zarah, that Avodah Zarah tree in Eretz Yisrael, so it was really the Jews' Avodah Zarah. Even though God gave Avram Avinu the whole Eretz Yisrael, but since the Jews in the desert did the Egel, so they showed that they liked the Avodah Zarah. So when the Goy bowed to that tree, they're doing it as a messenger of the Jewish people. Hachanami, so same idea. Yisrael Shazakav Levena, Jews set up a stone. So he wanted to serve that stone, but he didn't serve it yet. So it's not Aser. He showed that he wants this Avodah Zarah. So when a guy comes and bows to him, we don't say, oh, the guy, how could you ask something that doesn't belong to you? We say, he's acting as the messenger of the Yid. The Yid showed that he wants this stone to be served. If the guy serves it without asking permission, the stone is asa. Says the Gemara, why are trees Avodah Zarah? Maybe in the desert, the Jews only wanted a golden calf. They didn't want any other Avodah Zarah to serve trees. The answer is, Yisrael. The Jews said, these are the gods of the Jews. The Jews wanted to serve many different types of Avodah Zarah, not just the golden calf. They wanted to serve trees. And therefore, the trees were given the green light by the Jews if the Goyim in Eretz Yisrael served those trees. Says the Gemara, Ema kol the Bahade Egel the Tasru Mikam ve'elach nishtaru man moichek. So the question is, let us say that any of Ashereim that was during the time of the Egel, yes, they become awesome. But the Jews did tshuva. So the ones that came afterwards, those Avodah Zarah trees that came after the Jews tshuva, they should be permitted because the Goyim, the Yidden don't want them. So the Gemara says that's true, but how can you prove which one came before, which one came later? That's why the Torah says whenever you're going to find Ashreihem, you burn them in fire. So this is what we learn from Yeshua, and we learn from the story of Yeshua. Okay, so we will, as Hashem, continue tomorrow with.
Oh, thank you.